Hello, New York Giants fans, and welcome to a new edition of the Valentine's Views podcast here on YouTube. Please like, share, and subscribe to support the channel. All right, we're a little bit late today. We're doing our show in the afternoon rather than early in the morning. Our post mortem on the Giants Thursday night loss to the Dallas Cowboys. You know, Tony DelGenio and I, we're old guys. We need some beauty sleep in the morning. You know, these Tony, how these going to bed at 3:30 in the morning and getting up at 6:30 is just it's not good for me anymore, Tony. It's
Yeah,
just not.
yeah, I can believe that. I hate night games anyway. I like the 1 o'clock games.
Yeah, the night games when I'm in New Jersey and then, and I'm not asking anybody to feel sorry for me, but in New Jersey, you don't leave the stadium till 2 o'clock in the morning. You don't go to bed till 3:30. Then I got to get up and drive home in time for Dayball's Zoom call on the day after a game. It's not a lot of sleep involved in that, but it's all part of the gig, and so be it. So let's talk about the Giants 1-3. This was a game, we were split as a staff as to how this one would go. And even though I picked the Giants to win, I knew that that doing that was an iffy proposition because it was Dallas, because we know the history, we know what the Giants have been, and it kind of played out that way. It was a game that it felt like it was there for the Giants to take, and for a myriad of reasons that are all too familiar and getting harder and harder to explain, they weren't good enough to take it.
Yeah, and I think the what's missing is a big play at a big time in a game.
Mhm. Whether
And
that's a turnover or a big play on offense, I turned to, and I'll let you finish your point in a second, but I turned to Patty Traina of Locked On Giants and New York Giants on Sports Illustrated during the game last night, and I said, it sure would be nice if one of these passes that gets batted up into the air actually lands in the arms of a Giants defender someday instead of just falling harmlessly to the ground. So it's offense and defense, but I interrupted you, so go ahead and finish your point.
no, I was going to say last week they made a few big plays at the right time. They certainly Malik Neighbors had big plays there, and when they got off to such a terrible start, they came back and fought. And at the end of the game, right, they got Devin Singletary into the clear for a 45-yard run where he was able to then sit down at the 1 yard line and clinch the game. And so, those are the types of things that you see from a winning team. And I was starting to get that vibe for the first time from this team last week. But last night, there really weren't any of those big plays. There were some good plays. They did some good things last night, and I mean, they did a lot of good things last night. But when it comes to stopping Dallas and making them punt, they made them punt 3 times, but that wasn't great. And when it comes to making big plays on offense, the big plays on offense just weren't there.
As we're doing this, and we're live on YouTube as we do this, so folks, please, drop your comments, drop your questions. We'll get to some of those if we can as we go along here. And Raphael Soltren has dropped a comment that says, believe it or not, I saw a much improved team during the game on Thursday. And Brian Daboll made the point this afternoon during his Zoom call that he sees improvements. And I think every coach is going to try to hang his hat on saying that he sees improvements. But there are things with this Giants team there's an improved offensive line. There are there's a good solid group of wide receivers. There's a playmate, there's a star wide receiver in Malik Neighbors. Daniel Jones is playing better than he did a year ago. He's not, he doesn't look like the 2023 quarterback. He looks more like the 2022 quarterback. He's playing adequate, competent football. They're doing enough things to be in these games. The frustrating part is they're just not doing quite enough to win them. So you can argue that there's improvements. There's just not quite enough.
Yeah, that's right. And those improvements can come from many different places. It can come from the offense, obviously, completing a big pass or breaking out a big run, but it can also come from the defense with sacks, turnovers, and things like that. And they're just not getting enough of those kind of game-changing plays to win most of the time.
No, they're not. And during the Zoom call with Brian Daboll today that I was on, the big topic was the offense. The big topic was the missed opportunities down the field, and the two of those work hand in hand. The reality of it is, I think the Giants were 30th in the league last year in scoring, 15.6 points per game. Somehow this year, with everything set up for them to be better, Malik Neighbors, a healthy group, a healthy Wan'Dale Robinson. They have Darius Slayton and Jalen Hyatt, who Hyatt still doesn't have a catch through 4 games, which is amazing. But they have an improved offensive line, like we talked about. They have Daniel Jones playing better football than he did a year ago. They have Brian Daboll now calling the plays and running the offense, which should be a good thing for the Giants offense, was something that we lauded him for making that decision. And yet somehow, with all of those positives, with the fact that they're in the top third of the league in time of possession, with all of those positives, they're scoring fewer points a game than they did last year. They're scoring 15 points a game, which is toward the bottom of the league, and fewer than they did a year ago. And it's hard to fathom. It really is.
Yeah, and you talked about those big things that can be done, and what's different from 2022. And I guess I think of a few things. First of all, I think about the running game. So they're getting better pass protection than they've seen in, I want to say maybe a decade or more.
A long time.
Because even the late Eli Manning era, they didn't have a very good offensive line. And in fact, they had a fairly terrible offensive line. And certainly through Daniel Jones's first few years, they just had a bad offensive line. And this is certainly the best pass blocking offensive line they've had in a long time. However, this offensive line is not a great run blocking line. And I think even John Runyon mentioned after the game last night that the Cowboys changed their defense up front, and I think it confused the Giants, and they weren't sure their blocking assignments, or they were getting their blocking assignments.
Right. I just for explanation, I happened to be talking to Runyon last night, and that's part of what came up in the conversation with Runyon. And he said that Dallas did some things differently, and defenders weren't where the Giants blockers expected them to be, in a lot of cases. And that's, that's not the kind of thing that we can see on television or in the press box or whatever. But he said that in a lot of cases, credit to the Cowboys simply because they fit the run differently than they had in previous games. And in a lot of cases, the Giants, Runyon said he felt like they were blocking the wrong guy.
Mhm.
And that's, that's obviously not good. But you're right. It to this point through 4 games, it this has not been a consistently good run blocking offensive line.
Yeah. And then you want to talk about the passing game, and you mentioned, Daniel Jones looking more like the 2022 Daniel Jones than the 2023 Daniel Jones, and I'll certainly agree with that. But what I think the Giants wanted and needed from Daniel Jones is for him to be, let's say, a combination of the 2022 Daniel Jones and the 2019 or early 2020 even Daniel Jones. If you think about Daniel Jones when he came into the league, he was a good downfield passer. I remember him. One of his in his very first game, he hit a deep shot to Darius Slayton against Minnesota. A couple of weeks later, he hit Slayton on a 40-yard touchdown pass. First of Slayton's career. I remember in the opening game in 2020 against Pittsburgh, he threw a beautiful, I think, 42-yard touchdown pass, hit Slayton in the end zone for a touchdown. So he has been a good deep passer and taken those shots downfield in the past. And in 2022, he wasn't doing that. In 2022, he was doing all of the short stuff, right? And so he's kind of doing the short stuff well, like he did in 2022. But I think defenses have taken a lot of the zone read running plays away from him now. And so he's not doesn't have as many opportunities, let's say, to pick up good yardage on those plays. And so you have to be able to hit the long passes. And that's the part that's just missing now that wasn't missing when he first came into the league.
No, and it's something that the Giants emphasized all spring and all summer, that needs to be part of their offense. Tony, on Thursday night, they had a 15 play drive for 52 yards. That's 3 yards and change per play. That drive, which resulted in a field goal, that drive took 8 minutes and 10 seconds. 8 minutes and 10 seconds to go 52 yards in 15 plays. I referred to it in my post-game column. I referred to the way that the Giants were playing as offense by inches. They were inching their way, crawling their way up the field, and you cannot do that. That is what defenses want you to do now with the 2 high safeties and the softer coverage and 4-man rushes and all of that. They want you to throw the underneath stuff. They want you to try to get the yards after catch, because eventually you'll miss a play. Eventually they'll cover one. Eventually you'll make a mistake. The quarterback will miss a throw. You'll get a penalty. You'll turn the ball over. It requires you to be perfect. The harder you have to work for those yards, the more perfect you have to be. And a team like the Giants, you can do that. You can be that if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. All right. But if you're the New York Giants and you can't overcome a mistake, you can't overcome a drop or a missed opportunity, it's just hard to be that team. And the missed throws down the field by Daniel Jones, the Giants knew entering the season that they needed those. And they're just not getting them. What I want to say about Daniel Jones, Brian Daboll cannot say enough nice things about the way that Daniel Jones is playing the position. He's playing the position incredibly well. He's making the right decisions. He's throwing the ball almost all the time to the right places. The 4th and 6th throw he made to Malik Neighbors last night Brian Daboll couldn't have been more effusive in his praise about how perfectly the ball was placed. It was just an incredibly difficult catch in an incredibly difficult circumstance. The one thing that Daniel Jones is not doing is hitting the big play. He's got 2 big time throws, which is pretty much at the bottom of the list for all the starting quarterbacks in the league, per Pro Football Focus, in 4 games. And he is an awful 3 out of 15 on the 20+ yard throws. And I asked Brian Daboll today, I said, is it like a pitcher, who loses the strike zone? Because a couple of weeks ago it was everything was long. Everything was over the head of the receivers and uncatchable. Last night everything was way short. Even Malik Neighbors had to stop for the 39-yard pass that maybe could have been a bigger play. But and all Daboll said is he said he just missed a couple, he underthrew a couple, and we'll just keep working on it. So, but I would have to imagine, because I've pitched before, as a kid, as a baseball player, it has to get into your head after a while, and you have to start aiming the ball, because he can certainly throw it far enough. But they have to have those plays, and they're not getting them. And maybe that's just what Daniel Jones is at this point in his career.
Yeah, and I think that and I could be wrong. I'm watching on TV. I'm not analyzing the tapes. I can't tell you that this is the case, but I get the sense that there's a little bit of an anticipation problem on the long passes too. At least there was last night, that he's not letting the ball go until the receiver downfield has already shown that he's open. I saw a split screen post on Twitter of the one to Neighbors, the one he did not complete to Neighbors, and at the point where he releases the ball, Neighbors is already past the 2 defensive backs. I think it was Diggs, and it was I don't remember who the second defensive back was on that play. Might have been probably one of the safeties, Malik Hooker. And when he releases the ball, Neighbors is already past them. And really, ideally, what you want is to see him release the ball as he's getting even with the defensive backs. And I didn't see that play all the way through. Maybe that's a valid criticism. Maybe it's not. I don't know. But if he throws these things a little bit sooner, then the throw for the same distance winds up falling right into the receiver's hands in stride.
That has always been a Daniel Jones issue, is just anticipation and sometimes maybe being a hair late with some of his throws. And I think it's valid. It doesn't, though, explain the 2 deep shots to Darius Slayton. One that, Slayton had run by his defender and had to stop and come back because the ball wasn't thrown far enough. And then the free play where Jones knew he had an offside, so he makes the right quarterback play. He plays quarterback the right way. He says, I have a free play. I know I have a free play. I'm airing this out. I'm throwing it deep, because if something bad happens, it doesn't count anyway. And he has a touchdown if he throws that ball far enough, and he underthrows it and Trayvon Diggs, makes an interception.
Mm-hmm.
That you just have to air that thing out and make sure that you get the chance that you're looking for. And it's frustrating. I don't know how to explain it. Maybe Jones, I don't know, maybe it's mental. Like I said, it can be a confidence thing. Maybe I don't think it's anything physical with him, but and maybe this is just what he is now after years of having don't turn the ball over beaten out of him. Maybe it's just hard for him to just let it rip. I don't know, but it's so frustrating because the opportunities are there. And if you if you take advantage of the opportunities that the Giants have had, if you take advantage of just a couple of them in week 2 and a couple of them last night, the Giants are sitting here 3-1 instead of 1-3. And I'm not listening to ESPN New York with Chris Canty talking about how there's no way Brian Daboll can come back next year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why it's so frustrating.
Yeah, it's a fine line. And again, this is different from last year, right? Last year, they were routinely getting blown out early in the season. I mean, it's a stark difference between the 2 Cowboys games last year and the one last night, especially, right? But also they got blown out by Seattle. They got blown out by Miami last year, and so we're not seeing that. This is a much more competitive team playing a better brand of ball, a more competitive brand of ball than we saw last year. Still though, something is missing. And one of the other things I would say on offense is that I don't think you have to do a lot of game planning as a defensive coordinator on the Giants offense, because the Giants offense basically is Singletary getting the ball, Jones trying to throw to Malik Neighbors, sometimes throwing to Wan'Dale Robinson. And that kind of is the offense. Every once in a while, he throws to Slayton. As you say, Jalen Hyatt's rarely getting on the field. The Giants might as well not even have 3 roster spots for tight ends. They might as well just roster 3 more offensive linemen, because they don't really use their tight ends to do anything important except to chip block, right? And so it's an offense that's really not very multidimensional as far as I can tell. And Neighbors look so great that you can just keep on feeding him the ball forever. But I think an effective offense maybe needs to have more serious options than that, and it looks to me, a little bit too. I don't want to say simple, because there are some nice play concepts that Daboll is running, but I feel like they're not fully utilizing their personnel on offense as well.
Yeah, you're right. And, as we're going through this, I have a question. Christine asks if I think that Jones' knee and neck injuries, are having an impact on his deep passes. And look, I don't know. I can't speak to that. I've seen him make those throws in the summer. I saw him make some of those throws. He missed some early in training camp and got better as camp went along. Those kinds of injuries can change your fundamentals a little bit. I'm sure that especially the neck injury can maybe change your fundamentals a little bit. But I've seen him throw it too far. I've seen him throw it too short. So he still has the ability. He has the ability to get it there. I tend to believe that it becomes mental. And I don't know if it's as simple as they need a better quarterback. They need, I don't know if it's that simple, but at some point, if they keep losing games here, Tony, if they keep losing games, that injury guarantee is going to become a topic of conversation. And at some point, Daniel Jones is going to run out of opportunities. So, so if he's either going to start making those plays, or he's not going to be the guy a whole lot longer.
Yeah, and it could happen sooner rather than later. They're now, right in their toughest stretch of the season as far as opponents go, and I guess they travel to Seattle next week, and then I think they have Cincinnati at home, if I remember correctly, and then they play Philadelphia, if I remember correctly. So. And actually, all of those are actually winnable games. None of those teams looks like a great team this year, even though all 3 of them could conceivably be playoff teams this year. And certainly Philadelphia styles itself a Super Bowl team, but I'm not convinced that they are. They're having their own struggles this season. But still, the Giants aren't playing any patsies for the next few weeks. And I think the next the next patsy on their schedule was Washington. Now Washington doesn't look like a patsy anymore, right?
Unfortunately, Tony, for a lot of NFL teams, the Giants are the team that gets looked at as the patsy.
Yeah. And and speaking of Washington, right? Obviously, Giants fans, even Brian Dable, if you saw Hard Knocks, were very interested in Jaden Daniels. And you contrast what Jones did last night, or what he's done for the past 2 weeks as far as the long ball, and you watch Jaden Daniels throw the long ball against Cincinnati in that Monday night game, and he throws on fourth down with a defender bearing down on him, about to nail him. He throws this beautiful pass, hits Terry McLaurin right in stride for the touchdown that basically was the kill shot against Cincinnati. So that's the type of play that it's been probably 3 years since we've seen Daniel Jones make.
Absolutely. Tony, the thing that we have to talk about, I mentioned it. I'm listening to I'm listening to ESPN radio on my way home this morning. And Chris Canty is saying that he doesn't think there's any way at this point that Brian Daboll can survive this with the stretch they've got coming up, and be brought back next year. Now, I will say, from my own perspective, the door is open for that. I think, which I said after they lost in week 1, I think the door is open. I'm not there yet to the point where I'm willing to say the Giants can't get this right with Brian Daboll. I think the door is open for this to go far enough south that John Mara feels like he has no choice but to find another coach. And the question becomes, then are Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen tied at the hip? Do both go? Do you hire a new coach to work with Joe Schoen? None of that's a place where anybody wants to be. In your own mind, where are you on the question of how close to the end of his rope is Brian Daboll at this point?
So I don't think he's close yet. I think he could be very close as the season goes on. I mean, there are some head scratching things that he does, and a lot of it, to me, revolve around roster decisions, and maybe Joe Schoen has a part in that too. But game day roster decisions, and then usage of personnel. That said, though, they're competitive this year. Okay, I mean, yes, they got sort of blown out against Minnesota in their opening game, but if you've watched Minnesota,
right, they're good.
Minnesota is good, and that Minnesota defense is just confusing everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And they made CJ Stroud, who's the darling of NFL fans after his rookie year in the NFL, and now considered by many to be a top 10 quarterback. They made him look terrible. Last Sunday they beat San Francisco and held San Francisco to 7 points until there were like 10 minutes left to go in the game. And so I think you can throw out that first game, frankly, against Minnesota as being something that was not as bad as it looked at the time, because we were all watching that game thinking that Minnesota was a team that was kind of in the same boat that the Giants were, and so the Giants should be able to give them a good game and maybe win the game, when it actually looks like Minnesota's turning out to be one of the best teams in the NFL actually at the moment. So forget about that game. The other 3 games, they've been competitive. And if the Giants have a second kicker on the 53 for the Washington game, they probably win that game. And last night, you complete one of those deep passes, and they may win this game as well. And so, as you said at the beginning of this pod, they could be sitting here 3-1 right now. And you couldn't say that in 2023. 2023, they were just getting embarrassed by
Mhm.
opponent after opponent after opponent. And there must have been, what, half a dozen games in 2023 where they just got absolutely blown out by the team that they were playing. That's not happening so far this year. If it starts happening as the season goes on, then I think Dable's job is definitely in jeopardy, because they'll look and say, we're not making any progress. But if they finish with a bad record, and it's a series of close losses that causes them to finish with a bad record, I think that they keep both Dable and Shane on for another year, because I don't think John Mara likes the idea of firing head coaches and GMs.
You can make the argument, that there is progress, that they are more competitive, that this particular draft class that they just had could be really, really good. And you can make the argument that things can change, that they're close enough, maybe with another draft class, with the idea of finally finding, whether they'll get the right guy or not, but finally finding a young quarterback that they can try once again, to build around, um, rather than continue to beat their head against the wall with the way things have been going. You can make the argument, um, that that's a better path than blowing things up and starting over again. But it all depends on what they look like the rest of the way, whether they win games or not. The one thing that I will say, I've been in those locker rooms a few times when it looked like the players knew seasons were lost, when it looked like the offense was turning on the defense, when it looked like players were tired of the head coach. Um, when it looked like everybody was just, wanted to be somewhere else. And that's not what I sensed from the Giants locker room on Thursday night. Point blank, they were ticked off. They were ticked off because they knew that was another game that they felt like they should have won. Some things happened in that game that they didn't anticipate, like not being able to run the ball against the worst run defense in the NFL, um, not being able to score touchdowns when once again they drive the ball up and down the field and can't finish drives. That happened against Washington on a couple of occasions. They did score 3 touchdowns in that game, but they had opportunities to score more. It happened again Thursday night. So they're frustrated, they're angry, they're annoyed, they're not turning on each other. Um, before we call it a day, Tony, I do need to ask you, um, did you think Daboll made the right call last night, beginning of the third quarter, fourth and goal there at the 3-yard line, and choosing to kick the field goal? Did you think he made the right call?
No, and I actually take issue with the entire 4-down sequence, not just that final uh, call. I thought that, well, okay, so I thought they had first and goal from the 10, right? And so the first play was okay, but they just got a few yards from it. Then the play that drove me crazy was the second play, where they just ran Singletary and he got 3 yards. And it was already obvious by that time that they were having trouble running the ball compared to what they thought they'd be able to do. And you put yourself then into that difficult position. If you run and you're not running well, you're going to leave yourself with 3rd and 7, third and goal from the 7-yard line, which is tough. Then finally on 3rd down, they throw another pass, I guess, that is short of the goal line. And so my problem with that whole sequence was A, that they had a running play on 2nd down in the first place, and B, they never took a shot in the end zone the entire sequence of things. And so I would have rather taken the 4th and 3 and said, you know what, let's take a shot for the end zone, whatever we have to do.
you touch on an interesting point, Tony, and it's one that I actually had meant to make earlier. And we've seen this before this season from Brian Daboll. Um, to me, it's one thing to try to be efficient. It's one thing to make sure that the chains move, that you go forward, that you stay on schedule, that you do all of those things. And I thought on the third down play in this particular sequence we're talking about, the little swing pass to Wan'Dale Robinson, I thought there was an opportunity for Wan'Dale to score. He had one player to beat, and that guy got him by one leg. And the one thing Wan'Dale said was, and I don't think he meant to criticize Daniel Jones when he said this. He said, but he did say to me, he said, I wish I had gotten that ball just a step earlier. If I got that ball just a step earlier, I could have maybe gotten to the pylon.
Yeah.
But again last night, and I've had this criticism of Brian Daboll before, 5 drives that take that much time off the clock. Not a single ball in any of those drives that I can remember, even when you're getting down close to the red zone. I mean, there were a couple of shots of, balls that were, thrown inside the 10-yard line. I don't think the Giants threw a single ball into the end zone last night. Not a single one. And yes, Daniel Jones missed some throws, but just like I had this feeling against Washington, Daniel Jones missed some throws. And I'm 50-50 on the 4th and 3 because I can understand the argument for taking the points, but you're also a struggling team playing a team that's theoretically better than you are. Take your shot. And this is where I'm having a hard time with Brian Daboll this year is I think Brian Daboll is missing opportunities to take shots. And it's not just the 4th and 3. It's some of those times when you get down to the opposing 25 or 30-yard line. It's getting to 2nd down and 2 at the Dallas 44 and calling an off-tackle dive play instead of saying, we're down a few points here. This is 4-down territory. It's 2nd and 2 at the 44. I'm taking a deep shot here. We're going for broke. I'm taking a shot. We're going to try to single up Neighbors, or we're going to run Jalen. We're going to run somebody deep down the field and take a shot. Instead, it's, and I don't have the exact sequence in front of me, but it's dive play, just designed to try to get the first down, and they wind up with a field goal. To me, you don't have that sort of roster where you can just line up and beat the other guy up and down the field, 15 plays at a time. Take the shot. And that's, that's the thing that's bothering me when it comes to Daboll, who's a really good play caller for the most part. Although I really wish he would tear the page out of the playbook that has that throwback across the field play on it. But that's the thing that's making me crazy is be aggressive enough to call that shot more often.
Yeah, I agree. And, I guess it's getting harder to complete those shot plays, now that there's so much too high defense around the league. But there are ways to beat that. And I'm far from the football tactician, so I shouldn't.
And there are downs and distances and scores in games where it just makes sense.
Yeah. they in the preseason they ran, I guess it's called a Yankee concept, where they have a one guy on an intermediate kind of over route, and then they have then another guy going deep, and the idea is to draw the safety deep, and then you hit the guy with the over for an intermediate 20-30 yard gain, or if they take the shallow guy, then you go to the deep guy for the kill shot, right? And so I know there are plays like that in in the books for passing offenses, and it mystifies me why he's as conservative as he is with some of those plays. And yeah, I have to admit that's something I don't like about his play calling, that I've been surprised to see. Not that I'm an expert on the Buffalo Bills when he was there, but those first 2 years when Josh Allen was still developing as a quarterback and wasn't too good, they leaned on the running game quite a bit. And then once they got Stephon Diggs, and you had Josh Allen in his third year, then they were able to actually run a much more aggressive passing game. And I thought that Dable would try to model the Giants offense after that kind of third year Josh Allen offense, but I just don't see a lot of it.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, all in all, I think your Pro Football Focus grades snap counts post today sort of sums it up really, really well. The numbers, Daniel Jones was the Giants' highest graded player on, from last night. And in a lot of ways, what we're seeing and the results, they just don't match up. And it's frustrating because the results should be better based on a lot of the other things that we're seeing. There's too many missed plays, and as we talked about way back in the beginning, not enough game-changing plays. You need game-changing plays not only from Malik Neighbors, you need them from other wide receivers, you need them from the tight ends, you need them from your quarterback, you need them from the defense, and they're just not getting enough of them, and it's not going to change, because you just can't win football games when you're playing offense by inches and when even if you're holding teams to 18, 20 points, you're not going to win enough games if you can't score in the 20s.
Yeah, I was noticing a little conversation you had in the chat about big 6'6" tight ends in the red zone, and that's obviously that reminds me of another aspect of this team, and that is they were supposed to have Darren Waller as their starting tight end this year, naturally, and he decided to retire. But he was exactly that guy that you could presumably get in the end zone. They do have Isaiah Hodgins, and Isaiah Hodgins was doing that for Dable and Dable's first year with the Giants, but he's another one of those guys who's now buried on the depth chart, and you really never see a true X receiver in the game, the classic, big, not necessarily fast, but big receiver. And, you're saying that's who they're trying to develop Theo Johnson into becoming. But my impression of Theo Johnson is that Theo Johnson is far from becoming that type of player. And so their development of him seems to be just in-game development. Just put him in there and have him play until he becomes that player. And I just wonder whether that's the right thing to be doing with that player, whether that player is maybe too raw to be taking on that much responsibility at this point in his career.
Yeah, I might agree with that, Tony. I think that that maybe the better path would be to sort of shrink his role and spot his packages, and maybe eventually he'll be that guy. But right now he's definitely not. And anyway, Giants have a little mini bye here, so we get a weekend without a Giants game on Sunday, Tony. So I'm sure that you're gonna have a long list of chores.
Oh, my chores will be probably sitting and watching other games and just enjoying games for a change instead of agonizing over what the Giants are going to be doing.
Oh,
Now, maybe a
those are
little,
good chores.
maybe a little fall cleanup outside if the sun's out.
But those are good chores.
Mhm.
All right. Anyway, Tony, thank you much. Giants fans, thank you as always for listening. Please stay safe out there. Take care of each other, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.